Hi everyone and welcome. I hope that you are feeling great. In case you are not, you definitely want to listen into this one that I'm going to talk about now. So in this video I will be talking a little bit about what dopamine is, why we need it, and especially when we quit sugar or any other substance for that matter, and what you can do to try and soften the dopamine withdrawal that you will have to go through when you quit sugar. And if you're not yet subscribed to my channel, I would really appreciate if you push that button down there and give the video a thumbs up, share it with everyone you know, especially if they have any sort of addiction, even if it's something like scrolling on Facebook all day long or watching lots and lots of YouTube videos. That is also something that will release dopamine and that we actually get addicted to. It's not as strong as a sugar addiction or a heroin addiction or whatever, but we still have this compulsion to keep doing it throughout the day because it feels good in our brains. So you might have heard about dopamine before, so I'm not going to talk about that for too long, but in case you haven't really, or you don't really know what it is or have grasped it properly, I'll just mention a few things. So it's a very important neurotransmitter in your brain. And it's usually, when I'm talking about it, I'm usually talking about it in the context of the reward center and how we get rewarded for different kind of behaviors, or if we are something that is stimulating this reward system and stimulating the dopamine release, which sugar does, and all eating does to some degree, but some things like sugar and processed foods stimulate it to a much greater extent. But it's also involved in things like memory formation, motivation, attention, and actually regulating body movements. And that might sound a little bit odd, but they're all connected to the one thing: keep doing whatever it is that we were doing that gave us that huge dopamine release. So whenever you are getting that dopamine release in your brain, your body will remember this much better. It will not just remember what the thing was, but we will remember details much better and what we were doing with our bodies. So if it meant I picked an apple that way by reaching and twisting or whatever, then your body is kind of going to remember that because that was obviously something that you did that was very beneficial for you. So you're going to be remembering how to do that much better, rather than if you went out and just picked off some brown leaves because they were ugly or whatever. Next time you're going to do is like, oh, how did I do that? You can't really remember. But if they had a reward associated with it, you will remember exactly what you were doing. So when dopamine is released in large amounts, your brain will always create a feeling of pleasure and satisfaction. You will feel good, basically. And that will obviously motivate you to do whatever it was that triggered that, and do it again and again and again and again. So that's pretty much why we have the reward system, to motivate us to do things, okay? And I'm talking about everything in life. So when you're low in dopamine, you can have the total opposite effect. You can feel very lethargic. It's hard for you to be motivated about anything. You can't feel enthusiastic about anything, and even things that you used to enjoy might feel very, very dull, grey, boring, and pointless. And that's how dopamine works. It's really like all or nothing. So you need to have some dopamine, but you need to have healthy levels of it. Now, the thing is that some people, thankfully, I don't think there are too many people, but there are people that have very low dopamine levels in their brains naturally. And I don't think I'm one of them, thank God. But if you are one of those people, you're probably more likely to get addicted to different things, and not just one thing, and usually several things. So you might start with alcohol, and then you might start adding drugs on top of that, and you will start eating on top of that, and on and on and on. So they're usually people that do a lot of things that they know they're not good for them. They don't feel good by doing it, but if they quit them, they feel worse in a different way because they don't get that dopamine. They're just gonna be empty shells. They're not going to be motivated to do anything. So when you're using a substance or you are performing some sort of behavior that will create a large dopamine response, and you do it regularly, what will happen is that you're going to build up tolerance to that thing. So what I mean with that is that when we build up tolerance, that means that you have to add more and more of that thing to get the response that you got in the beginning. And what's actually happening is that your dopamine receptors are down-regulating, so you need more dopamine to get the same response, and that is what tolerance is. And so what is happening on a physiological level is that you pretty much, you can call it dopamine resistance. So if you're watching my channel regularly, you know I'm talking a lot about insulin resistance, and I've been talking about leptin resistance, and this is pretty much the same thing as dopamine resistance. You don't have as many receptors to create that signal of pleasure in your brain. And it's the same thing with the insulin, for example. You're down-regulating the insulin receptors, which means that the cells are not responding to the same degree when you have insulin around, etc. So that is just a form of resistance. And since you constantly seek this sort of pleasure, you want to feel good, who doesn't? That's, as I said, that's what's motivating us to do anything, because we want to feel good. So we need to take more and more of this substance, or do more and more of this behavior, whatever it is, to get this reward. And this is true for anything that you get addicted to. So whatever you feel like might be a problem for you, just apply this to that thing. So whether that be sugar or binge watching Netflix, watching porn, doesn't really matter. It's just the same thing. It works pretty much the same thing in the brain. So let's say that you want to quit sugar and you are a sugar addict, and you know that you will have to go through a period of dopamine deficiency in the brain while you biologically readjusts to this, okay? You need to be aware of this, but you also need to be aware of that after this period, you will feel much better, okay? So it's totally normal, and it has to happen, and there's no other way around it, unless you could somehow go and sleep for 3 weeks and not, you know, be conscious to notice what's going on. But this just has to happen. And something that will give you a moderate amount of dopamine, like eating a piece of steak, because eating anything will give you a sort of dopamine response. It's just not going to be huge for all different kind of foods. It's not going to feel pleasurable, or, you know, going for a walk is not going to feel that great, because you're just getting a small amount of dopamine, and it's barely going to scratch the surface on those receptors, and you might go there and tickle a little bit, but not enough to make you feel motivated. So it's the same thing when you quit sugar. It's going to be awful. It will. And there's nothing that you can do that isn't highly addictive that will cover this gap. And that's why we often have people that they quit sugar and they start drinking alcohol, or they stop smoking, they start eating sugar. So it's just to fill that void of, you know, you get something else that will give you a huge dopamine release. But obviously we don't just want to do an addiction swap to something else. So we need to do things that we can do that are natural things that will release some sort of dopamine, but be aware that it's not going to be to the same level as a sugar ever was, okay? So I want to just give you a few ideas of things that you can do to naturally boost your dopamine levels. And it's not some sort of miracle cure of any kind, but it might be somewhat helpful, maybe. You might not notice it so much, because when you're going through the dopamine withdrawal, you are going to get all those symptoms of being lethargic and not wanting to do anything, and everything's going to feel grey and boring, and life is not worth living anymore. So doing these things might just take the edge of it. You're still gonna feel pretty bad, but not as bad as you could have if you hadn't done them. So just keep that in mind, and don't think that if you're trying them and it doesn't help, it wasn't worth it. I know it might not feel like it when you're in there, because nothing is worth it. It's very, very hard to be motivated to do anything. So I have put these fancy things up here, so I'm going to put this one up. So number one is actually to eat enough protein. And, you know, I think most of you who are watching this channel actually eat enough protein. And what we want to get out of the protein is the amino acid tyrosine specifically. So this is a very common amino acid. You don't have to, you know, look at specific foods to get enough of it. You just need to have a good protein source, which is an animal protein source. And tyrosine is just a precursor to dopamine. So in studies that they have done, they have shown that increasing the amount of tyrosine and phenylalanine, which is a precursor to that, in the diet can increase dopamine levels in the brain. So that's the good news. But tyrosine also has a protective effect by, it seems to be able to, during high stress, which quitting sugar can feel like quite high stress, to protect the brain from depletion of the dopamine that you actually have. So that's another good thing with it. And you can find in anything like most protein sources: eggs, cheese, chicken, turkey, fish, beef, pork, whatever. It doesn't really matter. So the other one, let me just change this one, I can do that, is exercise. So we all know that exercise is good, and we usually, you know, when we're thinking about exercise and mood, we usually think about endorphins, which are released when you are exercising. And some research actually shows that exercise also increases dopamine. So that's even better. So even though you're going through dopamine withdrawal, you've quit sugar, and you really don't feel for doing any sort of exercise, just do it. Just set your mind to, you know, decide that you're going to do it X amount of days per week, and just do it, because it will help you. Whether you notice it or not, it will. And in humans, most of the exercise and dopamine related research has actually been done in the Parkinson's disease patients. And what they see is that I think it's safe to say that dopamine in the brain can definitely increase as a result of exercise. Now, there isn't a lot of this kind of research on addicts of any kind, so we have to kind of extrapolate that onto the addiction arena. But what we can say is that more dopamine in the brain is probably a good thing for you, because all of a sudden, when you take away the sugar, you are going to be dopamine deficient. There's no doubt about that. Right, number 3 is one of my favorites: sleep. I love sleep. I'm not very good at sleeping, but I know the benefits of sleep and how powerful it can be. I used to be able to, and every time I felt like I'm having a cold coming on or I have a sore throat, I used to be able to just go have a long night's sleep and then I'm fine. If I wasn't doing that, if I was just sleeping 6 hours or something, I would probably get sick. But if I managed to get 8-9 hours in, usually just disappear like magic. It's really strange. But I think sleep is very much underappreciated in terms of what it can do for us, in terms of everything. That's when we are repairing our bodies, etc. And that goes for all kind of hormones, and obviously dopamine as well. So naturally, when you wake up in the morning, a lot of things are going to be, you know, your hormones are going to be shifting. You have a lot of things that are going to be increased in the morning, and one of those is dopamine. And that's just to help you wake up, but that's just normal to help you wake up, go and be motivated to hunt some food or whatever it is that you're supposed to be doing. And it's usually also lower in the evening, and that's natural. In the evening you should start chilling out and kind of do low energy activities, and then drift off to sleep. So when you stay up late, this is something very interesting. So there has been a lot of research on this. When you stay up late, what is happening is that you will get even more downregulation of your dopamine receptors. What? That's crazy. So we don't even need to be sugar addicts or addicted to anything to downregulate our dopamine receptors. All we have to do is stay up late. And this effect is immediate. When you wake up the morning after having stayed up late, you will have fewer dopamine receptors than you had the day before if you hadn't been staying up late. Now, the good news with dopamine receptors is that the upregulation can also happen very quickly. But just know that if you're staying up late during this period when you are withdrawing from sugar, you're just going to make it even worse. You're going to make everything feel really, really dull because you're going to have even fewer of those precious dopamine receptors. Number 4 is music. So some of you might be quite happy about that. So music can stimulate dopamine release in the brain as well. So most of the research done in this area has actually been done on instrumental music and not so much on music where people are singing, etc. And what they found is that dopamine can increase with 9% after listening to some music that you really like, that kind of gives you the chills. So 9% might not sound like a lot, but you know, if you're feeling 9% more pleasure at the time, that might actually be significant for you. Now here's one that I wanted to put in, and that is meditation. So when you meditate, I say you, when people who are used to meditating meditate, they will get a huge dopamine release. Whether this is true for beginners, I don't know. I suspect that as soon as you if you can get into it, whether you're a beginner or not, I think that there will be some effect. So there was this one study where they were looking at 8 experienced meditation teachers. So these are obviously people that do meditate a lot and spend a lot of time thinking about it and actually doing it and teaching it to others. They know exactly what they're doing. But their dopamine production increased with 64% after 1 hour of meditation. So that is, and they compare that to when the same people were just sitting quietly doing nothing and, you know, resting. So by being active, they could actually produce 64% more dopamine. And that's quite, you know, that's quite something. I'm not a meditation person. I've never been able to kind of do that. I'm always thinking like my type of meditation is being out walking the dogs and just enjoying nature. And I'm sure that is doing something. How much it does, I don't know. But if you're into meditation, I think, you know, focus on it and go all in with that, because that can probably really help you if you know what you're doing and you're used to doing that. And here's another one of my favorites. Let's see. And that is sunlight. Yeah. I love the sun. I absolutely love the sun. So the number of dopamine receptors, listen to this, the number of dopamine receptors increases with increased sun exposure. No wonder I feel good during summer. No wonder I feel good when the sun is out, because I get more dopamine receptors. I didn't know that before I started reading about it now. And I was like, wow, really? So, you know, and that even goes for people who's, you know, visiting tanning beds during winter. When your skin is exposed to sunlight, you will get more dopamine receptors. And more dopamine receptors will make you more sensitive to the little amount of dopamine that you have. So if you're doing all of these together, you're obviously going to get a huge effect. I don't know if someone was actually doing all of these things that I'm telling you about now during a dopamine withdrawal and they were doing them successfully, maybe they would feel good. Maybe they wouldn't actually notice so much. I don't know. I haven't had anyone trying that, and I don't know if anyone ever has, but just imagine that. And if you're going to quit sugar or quit anything else, just take this into consideration of doing 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 or 6, maybe 8 of these, because I'm going to tell you about 8 things. So don't underestimate the power of nature. Right. And then we have massage. I love massage. And massage therapy has been shown to also increase dopamine levels with nearly 30%. And at the same time also reducing cortisol, which is reducing stress, and that way it won't deplete the dopamine that you have. So that is pretty much a double whammy. Now this is with regards to massage therapy. Can imagine that you could get a similar effect from just a physical contact with another human being. It's probably easier with massage therapy, but there is a lot of things going on in the addiction recovery research arena with regards to why people are addicted, how they're going to get out of that, and a lot of it has to do with the lack of community and connection with other people, and that when we are isolated and we feel alone, we're much more likely to be addicted to things. So don't take that too lightly either. Okay, and then last thing is nutrients. So there are actually, if you have certain nutrient deficiencies, you won't be able to produce enough dopamine. So if you're eating a nutrient-dense diet, you're probably fine. But if you're deficient in iron, niacin, folate, or vitamin B6, you may be struggling to produce enough dopamine. So if you like liver, make sure that you're getting enough of it, because liver will pretty much give you all of those. So you don't have to run off and get supplements, probably, unless you're severely deficient. So that is iron, niacin, folate, and vitamin B6. And be aware of folate is not folic acid. Folate is folate, and that is the natural way of that it appears in nature. It doesn't appear as folic acid. You can buy folate supplements if you need to, but some people can metabolize folic acid. Some people can't, and unless you have tested, you don't know. So liver people, fill up on your liver. Okay, so there you have it. Basically, that was the 8 things that I wanted to tell you about, and those are just a few ways that you can support your brain while you're waiting for it to basically catch up with the biology after you have quit sugar. If you want to take supplements, you can, and I would recommend that you start with L-tyrosine, and you do that in the morning. So you can start with about 500 milligrams right before you eat something, if you're eating in the morning, and you can do this before each meal if you're eating several times. Usually the uptake is better if you're eating something, because you're kind of starting the metabolism going. So you can do it on an empty stomach, but you might not get the same effect. If you're eating late in the day, I would probably say that do not take any tyrosine supplements, because tyrosine, you will make dopamine from tyrosine, but let's say you're having excess of that, you can start producing epinephrine and norepinephrine, or adrenaline and noradrenaline, whichever way you're saying it. It's the same thing, just different English. It's the same. And that will obviously keep you awake, so it's going to be hard to fall asleep. So you might not want to do that late in the day, rather as early as possible. But you can take up to 500 milligrams several times per day. And if you don't feel like 500 milligrams is enough, you can up the dose to around maybe 850 milligrams. If you get shaky, you know that you've taken too much. It's the adrenaline or the noradrenaline that will start affecting you. You can also take L-phenylalanine. Remember, that's L. You have the D form as well. which has other health benefits if you want to do that. So if you're looking at supplements, you can find L, you can find a mix of D and L, and you can find D. But you want to focus on the L one for this purpose, and that can actually be converted into tyrosine, and then that can become dopamine. So it takes a little bit longer for L-phenylalanine to actually work, but it will work the same way most likely. And some people seem to have a better effect from actually taking tyrosine together with vitamin B6. Now, I haven't done the research on that. I don't know why that is, but that is something that they often prescribe to addicts that are quitting different substances. So that's something that you can also try if you're going to go down that route and try supplements. Just remember to keep doing it every day, because if you miss one day, it will have an immediate effect. So you need to kind of keep topping those levels up. But I wouldn't recommend that you're doing it for a very long period of time. If you're going to do it, you start doing it when you start feeling like the dopamine withdrawal is there, so that you can help and just up your own dopamine production. And then you keep doing it for maybe 3, 4, maybe 5 weeks, and then you might want to kind of start lowering the dose, because you want your body to do this on its own. Now, for some people, it might be that you do actually have a brain chemical or brain deficiency in different amino acids, and then you might need to continue doing that for several months, maybe together with other amino acids, but that's a little bit more complicated, and you have to look at several different things. I'm not going to go into that in this video, but it's all very interesting. So I know that here in New Zealand right now, during COVID-19, we can't order any supplements or anything online that is not essential. But I actually usually order my supplements from an American company anyway. And I did check if they're still delivering, and it seems that that is not a problem. So if you live in America, you can probably still get your supplements. And if I can post a link to this company down in the description if you want to order from there. They're quite cheap, I think, and I think they ship pretty much all over the world, so it doesn't really matter where you live. And they got all sorts of supplements. So I'll put a link there anyway if you want to order some tyrosine or L-phenylalanine. Remember, it's L-phenylalanine and it's L-tyrosine. I don't think they sell D-tyrosine, but still just keep that in mind, because they have different chemical configurations, so they're not the same. And that was pretty much all I had for you today. Please just leave me a comment and let me know if you have tried any other dopamine boosting things, and what has worked and what hasn't worked for you, and maybe we can all take advantage of that, because I don't know everything. I haven't tried everything. I can just give you snippets out of, my knowledge and my research on whatever I'm doing, and try to put something together that would be useful for you. So I will see you again later this week. There will be a live stream this weekend, and I'm going to prepare that very soon, and that's going to be about fasting and growth hormone and how we can take advantage of that. So I will see you then, and take care. Bye.